Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Seberg. I'm the Assistant Director for the Medical Cannabis Research Center at Drexel University. We're very happy today to be joined by Sheena Roberson. She is the founder and visionary of Cannabis Noire. She's been putting on a Summer of Social Justice series with in-person events across the city of Philadelphia aimed at providing access to resources for marginalized communities within the cannabis space. I first met Sheena, I think it was roughly about a year ago, maybe a little bit less, through a mutual connection. And when I heard about her work specifically within cannabis and as well with Cannabis Noire and kind of the chapters that she's been starting, I knew that we had to have Sheena as a part of our work at Drexel. She's been an absolutely invaluable resource for us in terms of putting on our own event that'll be coming up on October 8th. We'll certainly talk about that a little bit later, but I wanted to give Sheena the floor and give her the introduction that she deserves as a member of our community advisory board and someone who's made a lot of progress within this space. So without further ado, Sheena, please give us a little introduction for yourself and tell us a little bit more about the Summer of Social Justice series.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if I could do a better introduction, Jim. I'm going to let you do all of my intros from here on forward. Thank you so much for having me. Of course, this is a great honor to be able to discuss our summer series and all of the work that went into it. So thank you so much for having me. As you so eloquently put, I am Sheena Roberson, founder of Cannabis Noire. And Cannabis Noire is a platform that is dedicated to creating a more equitable and access cannabis industry and medicinal community. We do that by ensuring that systematically disadvantaged groups are not overlooked, and we create space for those marginalized communities. One of the ways we do that is through uniquely engaging experiences, whether that be certifications and expungement events or our terpene tower quiz, Quizzo nights. We do a broad spectrum of networking and sort of socializing. Edutainment is what I like to call it, in an effort to not only just normalize cannabis and sort of destigmatize it, but particularly for marginalized groups, creating a safe space for them to explore and learn. We know that there's an extra layer of stigma and fright as it relates to adversely impacted communities that have been affected by the war on drugs. So we take special care in making sure we bring in those communities into the fold and try to make sure that we're providing reasonable restorative work, which was how the summer series even started. So beyond our business incubators, beyond our education programs, our business builders, our networking, our movie nights, the restorative justice work is sort of really where the meat is in terms of what our goals are. Overall, because I know that while the economic development and impact that the cannabis industry can bring, the root of a lot of the repair and the restorative work isn't just economical, right? So again, that was kind of what sparked the series.
Great. And what would you say are kind of like your biggest goals at this point that you're trying to tackle?
The biggest goals we're trying to tackle. So as of lately, we have recently been, we just started another chapter in Hawaii. So we are in 39 states now. And I believe that we found a replicatable model of restorative work that makes a lot of sense as it relates to what people actually need. And that's my sort of, that's my soapbox. I am constantly looking for ways to help amplify this message that, you know, restorative work and justice is far beyond legal aid. Our goal is to make sure that we can re-replicate these models of this new restorative work, or newly redefined restorative work that's focused and rooted in healing and measurable outcomes throughout our chapters across the country, in the hope that we can start rebuilding these communities one neighborhood at a time. And collectively, those healthier neighbors, those healthier neighborhoods become healthier communities that become healthier cities that become more equitable overall, right? And so ensuring that we sort of just carry this template and are able to pass it around to our other chapters has been sort of like the big push recently. We have a ton of amazing things that have come as a result of our summer series, including some community fridges that we have found some amazing partners at AIR to help us organize and bring to fruition. So that is like the top of my list as well. Because again, we want to make sure we're doing things in a way that identifies specific needs and problems and creates a very direct solution. Because obviously, we didn't get to this part, but the summer series itself was rooted in finding ways to bring therapeutic services and healing, and the other plethora of needs that folks have expressed personally, right? And things that are important for beyond the life of the event, which was another big part of what our focus was. Those are the things that my hope is to sort of continue to build out and build upon. But those were how we developed out each subset of programming workshops. We looked at what we saw from the work that we've done. We looked at the data, we looked at the people, we looked at what they needed. I'm from these communities. I know these people, I know these partners, I know these organizations. I know there's still an exuberant need beyond the day of the event. So after the numbers are counted and they're tallying how many people came and all of the things on social media, then when people can no longer find you after that day because they still have a question or their process wasn't complete, social media doesn't always reflect that. So they look very successful. People continue to support them, which is great. But there are 48,000 barriers of after you are released from incarceration. Those go far beyond legal aid. A majority of that is rooted in mental health and wellness, right? And how do we get people ready physically and mentally to support themselves, right? Beyond economics, we can teach you how to manage money, but we also need to teach you how to manage yourself. So we have parenting through PTSD. We've had financial readiness boot camps and poverty PTSD. We've had dining dialogues that are centered around conversation, cater conversation around mental health and wellness, just to sort of bring these things to the surface, because we have so many people who don't even identify this or recognize it as an obstacle because it's a foreign concept. So it's like, how do we find ways to integrate what we know is important, what we know works, what we know they need, and show people that this is the focus. Like, this is where you should be landing at. So it was a matter of figuring out also what language, what spaces made the most sense, what messaging are we using to resonate best with them, what organizations are we using, what partners are we allowing to connect with them. So overall, our focus now is spreading out what we've done with our other chapters and sort of giving them this template, recreating the food sovereignty projects and the mental health and wellness efforts that we are employing here, and also working to build out and continue to support community members who have expressed a need throughout the year. So that's what our nonprofit was born of, which is DOPE, and it stands for Developing Opportunities and Providing Equity. This nonprofit picks up the slack where the other organizations may not have the bandwidth to continue the communication after the day of the event, right? And or don't have the ability to connect them to additional services beyond, the scope of that pop-up. we are able to bring these people into our organization. We know what they need. We know what they've been through. We know what their experiences are. We know what kind of information and resources they probably receive. So at this point, we're just filling in the blanks and creating healthcare plans with partners at Black Nurses Rock and University of Pennsylvania. We've given away over 175 therapy hours and counting. Free therapy hours. We've given out MMJ cards, community supported agriculture, upwards of $6,000 and community supported agriculture, and so much of what we've been able to accomplish throughout the series we've now been able to sort of carry on into our fall program and create resource behind. Our career exploratory, where we focus on aligning people's natural gifts and abilities with opportunities that currently exist, instead of throwing them randomly to career fairs to like sort of just bounce between retail space and like these sort of maybe entry level or not, or positions that may not challenge their spirit or their passion, or even be of interest to them. And just because you have been formally incarcerated doesn't mean you deserve a sucky job. So let's figure out what the talents are and connect those talents, right? So from that, we've been able to create regular program. We have mentors and mentees now. We work with a host of organizations, businesses, and creative spaces like Next Fab, Rec Philly, Grant Boulevard, all of these spaces that are able to offer support and a plethora of different industries and employment opportunities and spaces. We have real estate mentors, we have culinary specialists. So there's a little something for everybody. And with that is the underlining message, that there's something for everybody. Everybody has a need. Everybody, especially after incarceration, is operating below normal capacity, right? What can we do to get them to normal capacity in a way that doesn't infringe on their values, doesn't infringe on their respect, their time, their energy? And so this was the best way to do it, is to invest in their mental wellness, invest in their health, show up, right? Create space for them to solve solutions for them. And that's what we were able to do. And the summer series really allowed us to sort of identify and pinpoint what was working, what made sense, and what didn't, right? What were we investing in that was, it did well, but could have done better? And what did we not invest enough of because people desperately needed it? So from that, we've worked to create the fall program that we have now. So I'm working on community fridges, build out in our fall program.
Great.
Long story short.
Yeah, and that has been reflected in a lot of conversations that we've had, certainly wanting to kind of replicate and amplify that within upcoming events, as well as, and I guess this is kind of the one question that I do have from that is, what were the things that stood out to you as new things that you needed to do that were the most successful, the most popular? I know that when we had talked before, specifically looking at therapy services and wraparound services, and I know that the mantra has always been it's more than just the legal support, but the wraparound services as well. Can you speak a little bit more towards that, and kind of the one-on-one conversations that you've had with people, as well as kind of the overall trends?
So in terms of our programming, and I guess what we were able to build out from the series, it's interesting because I always say people tell you what they need even when they don't tell you what they need. And so one of the things that we did was that I tried to make sure that I identified spaces where I've had people express to me that they felt not represented, not seen, not supported properly. We do have forms that you can fill out to tell us what you thought about the event, and I leave space for suggestions or recommendations. And I had several people reach out to me and say that there were not enough resources for LGBTQIA communities. So we did a conversation Online, I had the pleasure of connecting with one of the stars of HBO Legendary, official Shannon Mother. She is a queen mother of one of the most popular ballroom houses in the country. And so it was a great opportunity to tap into a very large LGBTQI community. And we discovered in the conversations that we were having that the impact on incarceration can sometimes feel 10 times worse to people who are experiencing a multitude of already identity and mental health and emotional obstacles, right? And so how do we properly support them, and how do we invest in them? It was because I connected with someone from that community and I found out what was needed. I did the work, I investigated, I had the conversations, I looked into what groups we can connect with. I did the work to figure out what was needed, but I did it in a space that I did it from in a way that I felt was respectful and would give people the most room to be authentic and comfortable. So that was why I reached out to Shannon, and I asked her to have this conversation. In a matter of maybe 15 minutes, we began to realize that the community of ballroom houses that currently exist do all the work of several different nonprofits functioning in different ways. They are helping people who are released from incarceration. They are helping people get employment. They are helping people find homes, because there's a community of LGBTQI people who have faced oppression for their sexual identity before and after incarceration, right? And so these houses have become this safe space. And they were raising money, they were doing the things, they were taking up collections, investing in one another, pouring into one another, and the network is there. They just need the resource. So the solution is not to go in and try to recreate the will. It's not to go in and try to be anyone's savior. We literally said, I'm like, this should be a nonprofit. They should all be like small nonprofits and register as nonprofits, register as small business. You deserve funding and regular support for all of the work that you're doing. And she said, that makes a lot of sense. We talked later, had a conversation. We're hosting multiple workshops between Philadelphia and Georgia with a multitude of partners and LGBTQI friendly organizations and allies to help set up spaces to teach people how to get their LLCs in nonprofit status, because they're literally creating halfway houses within their ballroom homes. So it's like a lot of times the solutions are there, right? The opportunities are there. We just have to invest and care enough to listen and be willing to do something about it, right? And so my grandmother always says, necessity breeds invention. Everything that we've done or will do will only be because people need it and have expressed an immense need for it, right? And I've seen with my own eyes that if this need is met, it will make a world of difference, right? Well, a lot of the people who come to our events, $100 could change their life, right? Like literally keep them from up or down. Things we take for granted, things we don't recognize as privilege in some sense. It is important to keep in mind when you're serving, because those are the things that escape us and we go over, and we're not investing in the people, we're investing in our event. We're investing in our outcome of our event. We're investing in what we can show and display and share with our partners, and not the people who are there for the help. And that's why you have people who come to these events and they show up in drones and numbers, and they have the bags and they take the pictures and they have the food, and then they leave and they still don't have the help that they need. And they're still in the same places that they were before. So we've gone as far as to identify obstacles that we know have been a problem, like license, ID, birth certificate, things that we know will hold up this process. They're on site. Those people are there. If they're not there, there's someone representing their office who can help you walk through that process. And if that person can't help you right then and there, our nonprofit will be available to sort of make sure that work continues, and there's someone we can connect you with. So yeah, it's our series is all of the things that we've been doing, all of the things that we've done have been rooted in measurable data and healing. So yeah.
So how has, in terms of these different events and getting in touch with different communities, how has kind of cannabis cut across different programs and been kind of intersectional in that way? How have you seen that be across it?
There is a very very fine line between people who accept cannabis and people who don't. It's very difficult in some aspects because we obviously are a cannabis organization. And I am very proud of that. I believe that, cannabis is medicine and don't agree with the stigma surrounding it, but I know they exist. And my goal is to help people. So do I want to force my name on folks, right? Or do I want to find a way to provide like support that kind of cuts across everything, like you said, because cannabis doesn't always do that. So at first I was very hesitant to keep moving forward and figuring out like ways I can kind of not use the name, maybe partner with other organizations that they could take the lead and I kind of have the byline. But what I realized very, very quickly was that because our messaging was very genuine and we made sure that it resonated with the audience we were speaking to, we rarely had people who were objectory to it. And at first I was like sort of hesitant. Our first expungement event was at a church. It's like very like, I don't know if this is going to be something that is well received, but what better place can we go to have a safe conversation about cannabis, about expungements, about systematically disadvantaged communities and what we can do about it, about mental health. It's a safe space, a community trusted space. Even if you don't go to church, at some level it's safe, it's protected. It's not like going to, like the senator's office for an expungement or something like that, right? So which can be a little intimidating if if you have adverse feelings toward the criminal justice system at all. So being in spaces, I think that help us relate to the community and help sort of guide us in was very important. It does a world of difference when the pastor of the church is like, and don't forget, Cannabis Noire is in the back doing expungements and free MMJ cards. So it's like, okay, that was right at the church's pulpit. Awesome, right? But people, I could have said that to 100 times, went around and personally asked people to come back and showed them why it made sense for them to come back and they wouldn't have moved. You have to have the permission, sort of, right? That unspoken like support and validation from people you trust before you move on things sometimes. And that's when I realized, okay, so we have to be very pragmatic about our partners. We have to be very thoughtful about where we go and how we do things and be very deliberate about our engagement. So obviously I did create Dope, the nonprofit, which still is somewhat in the cannabis realm. But the goal was not to use instead of Cannabis Noire. And so I proudly walk into spaces with this name and have these conversations. And I go through the stigma scares and all the things and I break down the education. And if it's a learning experience, every time I got to meet somebody, then that's just what it is. But each time people walk away, they not only remember our name, they not only remember our organization, but they remember what we stand for. And if nothing else, what we stand for and what we represented to them is now their recollection of cannabis. That's now their association with cannabis. So if nothing else, we are helping to somewhat relieve some of that pressure and stigma that surrounds it. So I stick by my name proudly in all spaces that we venture in. There's only been one time that I actually got any kickback where we were asked to speak at an organization, actually for a mass incarceration project. And they found out our name was Cannabis Noire, or didn't want us to use it to something. And they actually asked us, they like removed us from the lineup because of our name. But I definitely use that as an opportunity to educate them, because as people who are from this space, the adversely impacted folks who have suffered at the hands of cannabis and the war on drugs cannot be overlooked. Just because cannabis is involved, they are still a part of that space. They are still adversely impacted folk, and they deserve the same support, recognition. And honestly, these are the conversations that allow us to say, you know what? Cannabis in itself is medicine. Let's start there, right? And so it gives me reason to kind of open up. So I accept all challenges of the name. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's definitely an opportunity to educate and find ways on my end to also be thoughtful of all the spaces that we're moving in.
Definitely. Yeah, that's all great. I mean, in terms of when we've been talking, a lot of this aspect of it finally being accepted by an institution like Drexel, having a research center and coming together like this, the partnership really did seem natural between our two organizations, and having you on our advisory board has been absolutely great. And I guess kind of one question that kind of comes up for me, and I know that for a few people in our audience as well too, what are kind of the steps that you would say are good for people in the audience, or for people who maybe aren't as fully invested as you or I may be? What can they do to either get involved or to help advance those advocacy efforts, or even as we look at the changing landscape legally, what can we do to be change makers, to support the efforts?
What can you do to be change makers and support the efforts? I just had this conversation somewhat with somebody, and it's interesting when you think of support, and because obviously we wanted to make sure that our expungement events weren't just a bunch of legal aid sessions, right? And I've had the pleasure of connecting with some amazing folks and kind of taking notes. There's a lawyer, Chris and Patrick, that I kind of follow and watch. And there's a dope advocate, Teresa, Nightingale, that I kind of just basically I just literally watch what they're doing, because they're kind of always on the ball about stuff like this. But it's I look towards them for anything to that effect. They're sort of the people I would use as a reference. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to tell anybody the wrong thing, so I'm trying to be very politically correct, but I'm just going to talk because we all family here, right? I'm just going to say it. Whatever you need as an individual to be successful is what they need, right? They don't have the means to do it alone, right? They need support. So when we're talking about hosting expungement clinics and events, our events aren't for just the adversely impacted community members, like the ones who need the expungement. They're also for the other members of the community, right? Because this affects you too. It impacts you too. The way you show up is about educating yourself on what people need, what your community needs. In order for you to have a healthy, biodiverse community and a healthy neighborhood, a healthy block, a healthy neighbor, and like, you have to understand what's made them unhealthy, right? If you know nothing about the criminal justice system, if you know nothing about expungements, if you know nothing about the 48,000 barriers of entry that they face, none of what they experience, go through, what you see them do, how they respond will ever make sense to you, right? And it creates a sense of divide. So all of our expungement clinics recently have also added the component of like a community workshop style offer, where people are able to come, and although they don't need expungements, they can come out and they can learn some of the obstacles they face. So it's like, hey, I went to an event and I found out that there are 48,000 barriers that adversely impacted people face. A lot of those are related to employment and housing, right? So maybe since I'm a business owner, I can make a point of employing at least 3 people who have been adversely impacted by incarceration. I can do that. Maybe I own properties. Maybe I'm a real estate agent, and I can make sure that the people who have to check, yes, I'm a felon, still get a quality place to live, right? Like, we've even reached out to landlords and property managers, developers, and some of the more gentrified communities where these folks are coming home to spaces they don't recognize anymore, and say, hey, we need you to show up and we need you to invest back into this community. So we need you to earmark at least 15% of your properties for adversely impacted or returning citizens, right? Because they deserve to have a good place to live. They deserve to live in the community that they come from. So just finding ways organically to interject yourself and support these communities. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be, one-on-one. There's a multitude of ways that you can even reach out to our organization and say, hey, I'm not sure what I can offer, but here's what I do. I'll guarantee you there's a way that you can offer some support, be of aid, be of assistance. Not all advocacy or restorative work fits one person. It's not, you know what I mean? There's a piece of work for everyone to do out of this pie that only you can do, right? So I encourage people to come out to the events, come out to the expungement experience, come to the dining dialogues, listen to what people are saying that they need, because a lot of what we've been able to acquire, a lot of the success we've had from our summer series, that's allowing us to do the good work that we're going to be able to do throughout the rest of the year with our nonprofit, is from people we've partnered with, community members coming to these events, them seeing our work and saying, hey, I can't do this, but I can do that. And they have no idea how impactful they've just been, how much they've changed someone's life, giving a person a place to sleep that's comfortable at night, that hasn't had that in years, means the world. So if you can do that without haste, without obstacle, my God, you are doing the work. You are doing the things. You are investing in the community. You are investing in communities in ways you don't understand, because that's going to allow that person to find a job. That's going to allow that person to be a better dad. That's going to allow that person to be a better son, right? It's going to avoid re-incarceration, right? So we have to, again, make sure we're looking at the people, the things, and not the posts, right? A lot of that stuff can be very misleading and make people believe, it has to be very grandiose. It has to be this very big thing, but that's not always the case. So.
Great. Now, in terms of, I wanted to talk a little bit about your work with Black Cannabis Week going on this week. I know that you'll be there both Friday and Saturday with the career fair, and also kind of dealing with the question that I just asked as well, with kind of how we can support this. And I know that with the business incubation work that you do, and kind of getting people to a place where they can participate within the cannabis industry. Talk a little bit about kind of what your involvement with Black Cannabis Week is going to be, as well as kind of what Cannabis Noire and your organization does to help marginalized communities economically within this space, specifically related to cannabis.
So awesome. Thank you. Black Cannabis Week is this week, 18th through the 25th. And I've had the pleasure of connecting with this group because I'll probably say this again at Black Cannabis Week, but I attended a conference in 2018 And I noticed that there was no minorities or women. And I decided that this was probably something that I should look more into. Started exploring, found out there's this entire cannabis industry that I was unaware of. Luckily, though, there was one person all the way in the back, and that was Sharon. She is the founder of Black Cannabis Week, and she is a fierce advocate. There we go. Sorry about that. So she is a fierce advocate and just overall badass in cannabis. Okay. I'm not sure. Do you hear an echo? I hear echo.
Yeah, a little echo.
Okay, that's why. Because I was still on the laptop, guys. Sorry. So she was really cool, very, very educated about cannabis. And I was just thinking, like, wow, like I didn't know these people like existed. This is awesome. But it would bother me that she was like all the way in the back and she was like one of none. And I kept thinking, like, how is this place full of people? Like, who did they advertise this to? Because I didn't hear anything about it, and it's full. This is a full-on conference. So obviously, it prompted me to start Cannabis Noire. So when we're talking about a Black cannabis conference now, fast forward a few years later, it's super monumental and it's incredibly impactful, and it means a lot, right? So when I was asked to be a part of it, I was more than ready and happy and excited. Cannabis Noire is hosting the career fair and expungement experience. So people who are interested in learning about the cannabis industry and learning about opportunities within the industry, or if they're interested in learning more about building or scaling a business in cannabis, there will be a ton of workshops, programs, resources, speakers, panels for you to choose from, for you to explore, all free. There'll be on-site interviews for a variety of different cannabis brands and companies, as well as a headhunter. There will be some workshops to help walk you through what that interview process looks. How do you prepare for the cannabis industry? How do you align your natural gifts and existing experiences with opportunities in the cannabis space? And obviously, like I said, how do we effectively build brands and businesses within the cannabis industry? So I'm excited for that. Some amazing panelists, partners, and speakers that are going to be able to offer an abundance of wisdom. So I encourage anybody who's ever thought about it, consider it, or thought that this might be something they want to do, to definitely make sure they make it out for this, because it's going to be worth it. Our expungement experience is going to be very similar to ones we've done before, just on a larger scale. We'll obviously be doing expungements. We'll be doing some last minute marijuana pardon program work. We'll also be registering people to vote, because being registered and making sure that you are a part of the numbers that are asking for change is imperative. And we'll also be doing some MMJ certifications for qualified persons. There's free haircuts. There's also a career exploratory experience for the expungement piece, because we don't want folks to not believe that they have a way to access this industry and capitalize off of it as well. There are ancillary opportunities and spaces that you can be interjected in, that people who have been adversely impacted by incarceration can find themselves in. So, and we're doing free haircuts and auctioning off an art and infusion machine. So all you have to do is come and enjoy. This was important for us because a lot of what we do is rooted in making sure, again, healing, restorative work, but also making sure that we get enough viable players on a playing field to create the leverage we need to demand the equity we deserve. We're still not at the table like we need to be. There's still a large portion of us who are on the menu still and not at the seat of the table. And so we want to make sure that we are preparing people beyond the pop-up space and the vendor space to be successful and fruitful and create scalable business models, so that when the time comes and people say, you know what, you scream so much about these Black small-owned, disadvantaged, systematically disadvantaged, adversely impacted groups and their businesses, show me what you got. I can put my hands on 10 of them because I've personally incubated, supported, and helped build their brands into a place where that can happen. So it was important that we offered a bit of that, and then allow people the space to find out how they can explore that more with us, because again, you know, the opportunities are there. We just have to be pragmatic, and we have to create the leverage that we need and want to, that we need to get what we want and deserve. And that's the same as we talk about making sure people are registered to vote and properly represented in voting. We want people to have MMJ cards, so they're properly represented in data, and making sure that, you know, the studies are reflective of communities and people that look like us. So our all of the goals of all of our immediate goals are front and center at Black Cannabis Week. And so, you know, we also are doing a parenting through PTSD workshop, as well as doing some education surrounding like patients' rights and stuff like that. So excited for Black Cannabis Week. Our career fair is 9/24 this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It is, again, completely free. You can feel free to register online, but you can also just show up because it is an open door policy. We're excited to have everyone, and we're looking forward to helping as many people as we can, because again, this is coming off of walking into the Pennsylvania Convention Center and seeing nearly no one that looked like me, to walking into the vestibule of Temple and seeing a bunch of people that look like me, all excited and ready to explore this space.
Great. Thank you for that, Sheena. And definitely looking forward to attending myself on Saturday. Definitely want to open it up to Q&A right now for anyone in the audience who may have a question. Feel free to drop it in the chat, and I will ask it to Sheena. Certainly want to give everyone a chance to interact if you have anything. I definitely wanted to kind of talk briefly, Sheena, while we wait for questions to come in, talking about kind of your work with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just wanted to see kind of the work in which you do, and certainly want to create an additional space as well for some of our student groups potentially later on. Actually, we do have a question that just came in, so try to get to the audience Q&A first. Question from Pascal. What has the response been from the city government? Has Krasner's decriminalization changed the landscape at all? What does that look like?
So it's interesting. If you look at numbers, it may very well likely reflect that that decriminalization does in fact help, because overall it does. But when you're talking about marginalized communities, those numbers don't look the same, because unfortunately, Black and brown people are arrested more than 4 times the amount of their white counterparts. We've all seen that little quote floating around. But what people don't think about is that happens because the stigma of Black and brown people and cannabis still exists. And it's a very separate stigma from what we all experience, like the reefer madness and all of the things. This stigma is rooted in race, and it's rooted in racism. It's rooted in a misunderstanding of what the war on drugs really did and who it impacted and how. So when we talk about decriminalization, there are folks who know, that they have a card, they can go light up at a park, and they won't touch it with a 10-foot pole if certain people are in the room, because they're still psychologically very uneasy about the idea of utilizing cannabis safely. That almost is an oxymoron for certain Black and brown people, especially those who have experienced incarceration, especially those who have experienced incarceration because of drugs. So for them, decriminalization, it means something. It's exciting, but we also have to make sure that that what's caused the systematic disadvantage, what it's rooted in, is also addressed, because those things allow for the landscape not to change, but so much for us. Like, I am a patient, right? I have my card. I am an advocate, a very public figured advocate. I will not use cannabis in certain places, like, just because I have to. I don't know how the situation will unfold if I have to spend too much time explaining who I am and why I'm smoking, right? Because traditionally, just it's what I mean. So those things are those things in terms of the landscape changing. Those things, I think, need to be addressed a bit more before it's truly a more equitable, like, cannabis landscape where people just feel like patients and not like Black patients, or but and honestly, the government, it's funny because the government is very is focused on the election, right? So it's like, what do I need to say to win this thing? We have 2 vacant seats from the mayoral rush right now. So you have all, like, people who are, like, literally just catering to their districts or whatever they think people want to hear. So it's a little hard to get a feel for specifically, like, how we can properly address that space. But in terms of the landscape of it, which I actually do have a solution for. I keep trying to plan this greener brunch where we sit all the politicians down in one room, and it's like, okay, what do you think? That's not true. Here's why. And what do you think? Okay, well, that's not true, and here's why. Okay, so where are we now? Right? Like, can we move forward? Because if your misunderstandings are rooted in misconceptions, racial stigmas, and things like that. I mean, I've literally heard people who are like, they increase, like, weed increases gun violence. I have so many statistics to say otherwise. I don't even know how to explain this to you, sir. So it's like, how do we get all these folks in one room to have that conversation? That's probably how we address that. But in terms of it changing the landscape for the cannabis community, we all had a sigh of relief, but I think there's still a pause for Black and brown communities who know that, if it can be used against them, it will be still.
And to that point, Sheena, as well, I mean, hearing you talk kind of reminds me of a lot of the stuff that I've done throughout me getting my MPH, and a lot of conversations that we've had about the decriminalization is just for possession. It's not for manufacturing. It's not for distribution. And really, distribution and possession, it's very arbitrary and really in the hands of a police officer to determine. So do you determine it to be you have 2 separate baggies on you? So if you're a medical patient, you have a sativa, you have an indica, you have one for nighttime, one for daytime. You have a specific strain for something, a specific strain for something else. You could have 2 grams on you. And someone could say, or you have a scale as well, because you want to make sure that you're dosing your medicine properly.
Yep.
That is pretense for distribution as well. So it really, as we've seen it with other states, with Colorado, taking it out of the hands of police officers to be the ones who are using their stigma to determine whether a Black or brown person is selling versus whether that's their medicine. It's, I think that as well plays into it in terms of conversations that we've had before.
Yeah.
And I think that as we talk about the differences between decriminalization and legalization, it's important to understand what those nuances are in the law, and kind of how it's implemented, and as well, how do we then create educational programs, not only for the general public, but specifically for police officers, specifically for district attorneys, specifically for everyone within the chain to have targeted messaging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, not to cut you off, that's when I've gone to speak about diversity and inclusion, and we're having these conversations about creating more equitable spaces and what that looks like and what that means, the language has to be different for every business, every group, because it needs to resonate with them and organically, right? You have to meet them where they are to help them understand what the obstacle is, because obviously if they saw it before, we wouldn't need to have this workshop. That's why I'm here, right? So we want to figure out ways that we can express these things and relate them enough to people that they say, wait, I identify with that obstacle, that feeling of uneasy, right? That feeling of a barrier. I identify with that, whether it be convolute or not. The goal is to make them see that, wait, this hurts, right? This hurts. It's negatively impacting how someone performs when they're hurt. Your bottom dollar is hurt when someone's hurt. And quite frankly, although that's usually what people start listening to, it does give us room to sort of look to show people, hey, like, this is how a happy, healthy, well-established, equitable company culture operates, and this is the numbers that they do. And here's one that's the opposite, right? And you can see the dysfunction, the mismanagement, the excessive labor costs. There's a bunch of things that happen when equity is not made prominent and not put first in terms of how you run, manage, operate your staff and business. So I've had the pleasure of working with groups like Uber and Keystone First, Mendoza, and Independence Blue Cross, and all these spaces. A majority of the time, the defining moment is when people recognize that, oh, wait, so this is going to make you not able to do the work as efficiently. Like, you have to really start at showing them how it impacts their bottom dollar, but in that you show them how it impacts their day to day. You know how much productivity you lose when people are focused on the wrong thing, my God, right? And so when they see that, though, it's like, oh, okay, like, I guess I'll, but they also realize that the answer is not, let's hire another Black guy, right? They realize that the answer is changing the culture and the way we treat each other, so that there isn't another Black guy, but just an office full of people, and that is diverse by choice and nature. So
I have another question here from Dr. Lankenau. Just wanted to hear your perspective on the history, the local history to Philadelphia about people using cannabis for medical purposes, specifically within Black and Brown communities, both preceding legalization and post legalization. And has it changed at all? Has it, or is there any way in which it's really remained the same, or any insights that you may have?
So one of the ways that I teach Black and Brown communities about plant medicine and cannabis is having the conversation of it's our historical relationship to cannabis, right? I always tell people, like, you got it honestly. You inherently have earned the ability and right to be in this space, to manage, dominate, own this space, right? Since slavery, Black people have been a part of cannabis, right? And cannabis and hemp have been a part of Black folks since then, right? Whether we're talking about Harlem Renaissance, whether we're talking about the sails of ships and the ropes to be hung that were being made by the hands of slaves, the buck blue Negroes in Tennessee that were known for like chucking the most hemp than any state, right? And went for a pretty penny because hemp was the leading fiber, right? And we further back, our ancestors used plant medicine to treat a multitude of things, right? And so making sure people know that this not only is an inherited right, to have access to alternative medicine is not a crime, and it shouldn't be something that's frowned upon, but this is something that's more suitable to you and your historical efforts to thrive. Oh, I'm sorry, kitty. I'm sorry. I just kicked my kitten by accident. I'm sorry. It wasn't hard though. She just scared me. But these historical, like historically, we've been taking care of each other through plant medicine, and people say, oh, like comfort food, and Sunday dinners was kind of like the thing, and that's part of us taking care of each other, which is why we do the dining dialogues. Food is a form of love, and offering condolences, support, congratulations, right? And so making sure that people know that just as the way food is a part of our historical tapestry and how we communicate and loved each other, plant medicine is a part of our historical tapestry that allowed us to take care of each other and invest in each other and support each other physically. I mean, we can talk for hours about the relationship between Black and brown people and cannabis, but I mean, even as far as, slave owners giving slaves cannabis to avoid them from committing suicide in too large a number, right? These things are part of your transcendental identity. It's in you. You are part of this space, right? But because it's been criminalized and separated from us and made to be seen as a bad thing that bad people do, we separate ourselves in an effort to move away from the naturally bad things that get attached to us, right? Like you walk around, you're just Black and automatically up for suspicion, right? For example. So if you're somebody who feels that way, ideally you're not thinking like, oh, cannabis is probably the answer. You're thinking this is going to be something that makes me look not like a great person potentially. Let me stay away from it because I don't want to seem like that guy, right? I don't want to seem like I'm just like everybody else that they stigmatize and stereotype. When in all actuality, those people are far and few between. Those stereotypes barely exist. And many of the people who created the legacy market that still exists today, that the cannabis industry derived from, learned from, built themselves upon, are actually very well knowledged neighborhood herbalists, right? These are people who they may not know specifically the science behind why it works, but they know it works, right? And so these people are the folks who have done the work. They've built the pathways. They've done the branding with the different bag colors and jars or whatever. They've done the work with security, right? And coming up with safe methods to have these exchanges. They've done all of the groundwork. So as it relates to Black people, especially in adversely impacted communities, the industry has literally just been gentrified from what already existed in Black and brown communities, right? It was how we took care of each other. It's how we fed our families. It was a way to generate income. It was a way to feel better. So all the more reason I push to have as much opportunity to connect and educate and share the experiences and history of cannabis as it relates to Black and brown people. Again, the Prohibition era in itself, the term marijuana even, right, being called marijuana is a mispronunciation of what Mexicans coming up from the war pronounced it. So honestly, and not to go into too much, I still don't know why we call it the medical marijuana program and not the medical cannabis program, other than the fact that we want to keep control of the stigma and what that means. We want to keep the fear factor there just a bit while it's still Schedule 1 to make sure that, we can control the narrative as long as we need to. But for all of you who don't know, I don't typically use the term marijuana, which is why we're called Cannabis Noire, not Marijuana Noire. So,
and why the Drexel Medical Cannabis Research Center does not have marijuana in the name.
Absolutely.
removing that stigma is a huge part of it. And certainly as we look to move forward and partner with different events, and certainly I'll touch on that in just a second, but really want to make sure that we give that education of reframing it as a medicine and understanding that I'm even a believer that there really is no truly recreational purpose for it, that even when you do use it, that there is some recreational benefit. If you're replacing alcohol as your recreational substance, the evidence that is out there right now, not completely conclusive, but certainly evidence out there that shows that it's less harmful as a harm reduction tool, whether it's chronic pain using cannabis instead of opiates, whatever it may be, there are certain anxiety medications, things like that. So talking about it and reframing it in that mindset is something going to be a huge mission for both the Research Center as well as partnering with you with Cannabis Noire, and certainly wanting to make sure that we can work together to really get that message out there. The last thing that I wanted to touch on is the Medical Cannabis and Community Resource Cookout that we're going to be having coming up on October 8th. It'll be in Malcolm X Park in West Philly, 51st and Pine, from noon to 4 p.m. Once again, that's October 8th. We're partnering with Sheena and Cannabis Noire, Philly Lawyers for Social Equity, Sharing Access, Everybody Eats Philly, the Philadelphia Cannabis Business Association, Primary Care Progress, the Dornsife Community Wellness Hub, and we're also going to try to have voting registration there as well. Still working on a partner for that. But if anyone you know would like to participate in the event, we will have volunteer signups. We will also have, it's really just open, first come, first serve during the time. If you need any of those services or know anyone who needs any of the services, we're going to be doing the expungement and record clearing services. We're going to be providing free medical marijuana cards, cannabis cards, free food, cookout food provided by Everybody Eats Philly. Chef Kurt Evans is an absolutely great chef, so looking forward to having him prepare everything there. It will be rain or shine too, so feel free to come out. Make sure that, and to respond to Felina's comment, we don't actually have the promotional event as of yet. We're still finalizing our partner list right now. So we will be sending out via email to everyone that RSVP'd to this, so that you'll be able to see that. We will also include the Qualtrics link for people who want to volunteer as well, have several shifts for that. But I did want to end on this note. Sheena, thank you so much for joining us. You've been an absolutely valuable part to our community advisory board. It's been great working with you, and I look forward to a great relationship moving forward with Cannabis Noire and figuring out different ways in which we can partner and really magnify everything that you do to our community, and vice versa, to really help expand opportunity within the industry to everyone that we're trying to reach.
I couldn't be more excited and grateful to be a part of the board. I think we're going to do some amazing work. I think there's some data to be researched, some communities to help build and pour into. And I'm excited that, you know, Drexel University is sort of taking the lead and making sure that they are on the forefront of what real restorative work looks like, what real social equity looks like, and what real cannabis community means, right? Because the goal is to make sure that we're all healthy and we're all happy and we're all thriving, right? And so creating programming and opportunity boards, instances, our event on the 8th, which is going to be super epic. Those are all extremely important to building out healthy cannabis communities. So I am so excited. I'm looking forward to it. I hope everybody who joins us today and RSVP who came or didn't come makes it out October 8th, because it's going to be awesome. And like Jim said, we are still, you know, finalizing partners and resources. So if you know anyone or you think you could be of aid or would like to be of aid, feel free to reach out. We are more than looking forward to continuing to build community around this, and finding ways to continue our partnership. And Cannabis Noire is available to support any folks who may need resources. So if you know anyone who's been adversely impacted by the war on drugs or incarceration, feel free to reach out to me. You hit my email, check out our website. We are more than happy to support and provide aid to those folks. And thank you guys too for joining. Thanks. This is cool.